Hi class, and welcome back to my vlog for Films About Painting Spring 2020. Today I will be discussing Professor Peck's Lecture 4, titled The First Modern Art, and I will also be answering the question of what were the factors that Peck argued in the lecture that ultimately led to the dramatic shift in paintings during this era, and I also will be seeing if I agree with Peck and if I think he's right. While many factories contributed to the change during this period for art and for painting, I think one of the biggest ones that kind of everything grew out of was the Industrial Revolution. This was a huge deal, and as Professor Peck states, with this change in painting during this era, he says that a part of it has to do with the Industrial Revolution. If paint is in a tube, I don't have to sit where I mixed it. Instead, I could just take it outside and go to work. So this ultimately meant that painting, because of the Industrial Revolution, which allowed for paint to be in tubes, now people could paint outside. They didn't have to paint indoors. Artists could go exactly where they wanted to paint an image from reference, which was awesome. This was new. But this also ties into another factor for the dramatic shift, which was, in general, painting outdoors. And as Peck mentions in the video, since artists were painting outdoors, their, as I quote, objective was to finish the painting, end quote. So, and to do so in one sitting, this led to quicker paintings, more like painting sketches, and they took less time to do them. They weren't necessarily perfect paintings then, because they weren't sitting there looking at it, taking their time, taking years to finish it. No, it was done. They were outside, and then they weren't anymore, and the painting was finished. And what evolved from a finished painting in one sitting was Impressionism, pretty much. So while I think it makes sense the Industrial Revolution led to more people being able to go outside, and this deals with, and I'll talk about that later, how the middle class grew larger, more people were able to afford artwork, more people were able to afford to do artwork. They were able to have this leisure time. I think something that wasn't really discussed in this video was how the working class was ultimately depicted then during this era too. So from Daily Art Magazine's website, they have an article titled Artists in Industrial Revolution, Images of the Changing World. They mention that in a section in this article called New Patrons and Commissions, and as I quote, "The machine age brought new clients to the art market. The factory owners could easily afford to buy artworks. They also wanted the world they created to be depicted by the artists." And a number of paintings, Pierre Hillestrom, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, was engaged to depict the furnace-lit interiors of forges and foundries connected to the Swedish iron-making manor estates of the late 18th century. In this picture, and I'll show that after I finish this quote, the scene is from the Anchor Forge of Söderfors in the province of Uppland. During the early industrial period, the iron-making estates of this region were of crucial importance to the economic life of Sweden. The painting shows a realistic scene of the forge, where the then world-famous anchors of Söderfors were being made, many of which were exported to England. And so then this article goes on to say that, and as I quote, "Historians have noted the extreme truthfulness in all details in Hillstrom's industrial scenes. Through this quality, his paintings are invaluable sources for our knowledge of early industrial history," end quote. So I think that's really important to mention too, that it's not just these beautiful outdoor scenes being painted, especially while the middle class is created, that does mean the working class is still there. And the working class are the ones facing the most hardships during this time. It's interesting how art can depict them. And while this doesn't really lead into the first modern art, this doesn't really lead into Impressionism, I do think it is important to note, though, that that is going on at the same time, and that the Industrial Revolution was big for art because it allowed for different scenes to be shown, things that really weren't shown before. And I'll pop up that Hillstrom painting right now. And while Hillstrom's painting was painted in 1782, it can be argued, though, that especially in that how Daily Art Magazine described it, that this was an image of what kind of was continuing on though during the Industrial Revolution. And I know the Industrial Revolution is more dedicated to like the mid 1800s and onward, but it doesn't really make sense though that there isn't a huge depiction of the working class and that we're focusing more on the middle class. And maybe that's just my Marxist theory coming out, but on Art History on Stuff's website, in an article by Jeanne Willett titled The Industrial Revolution, Jeanne states that in the process of attempting to locate the modern, the role of art would change, the role of the artist would change, the role of the public would change, and ironically, the artist and the public would become completely separate. How did the artist become separate from the mass art audience? This estrangement was the result of significant social and economic changes that gradually changed the artist's role in society, and we could attribute that to the Industrial Revolution. So as Professor Peck describes in the video, he states that a great shift in this period was the creation of the larger middle class, and the middle class is ultimately representative of the consumers. And the middle class differs from the lower and upper classes because 1, they have more money than the lower class, and 2, they have less money than the upper class. And since the lower class really doesn't have enough money to spend on luxury items, whereas usually the upper class tends to hold on to their money and save it all, the middle class is allowed to have this extra free money, and this is how the market is able to increase and do better, all of that, blah, blah, blah. Not going to get into it. It is a subject of mine that I like to talk about, but I'll be quiet. But as Peck states, this creation of a larger middle class meant that the middle class, and as I quote, was able to take a day off, end quote, from work. So in doing so, more people were able to go out and paint and go on vacations and paint outdoors, and this also meant, and Peck describes this in the video, that that the middle class could create of their own. They could create their own ideas that contribute to the Industrial Revolution, that contribute to machinery, all of those different things like that. And this is a big deal. This is a big deal because the art market and the consumers, it became a whole lot larger. It wasn't just British royalty or not British royalty, Italian royalty, whoever, that could obtain all the artwork. No, anyone could. Anyone could make it now, with more leisure time, with not having to worry about work all the time, and getting to do something fun, you know? So a third and final, or maybe fourth and final, either way, creation that was a product of the Industrial Revolution that had such a dramatic effect on painting, that caused a dramatic shift during this era, was the invention of the camera. And this is really important because if a camera can now take the image of real life, do we have to paint it? I don't know. And so as Professor Peck discusses, he states that the invention of the camera affected this period in art, and that as I quote, invention of the camera took over their job of rendering reality, and if there's a machine that could do it better than you, or that can do it in a more accurate way, then is it more necessary to do that. And so pretty much the camera took over and took the place of realistic paintings, and this also led to artists wanting to explore a little bit more. So if the camera could do it, artists can have more fun. They could do something different, something that isn't as realistic, because there already is an art form, already an invention that can do it within seconds. It takes less time on top of it too. So this opened the doors for more creative freedom. So in answering what factors led to the dramatic shift in this period for painting, it's pretty much the Industrial Revolution and everything that came with it. And I would say that Professor Peck is right, and that I agree, based on all the information that was given in the video. And also, the only factor, though, that I disagree a little bit with, I wouldn't even call it disagreement, it's just that the working class, what impact, though, did this shift on the industrial period have on them in terms of art? And that is something I'd like to see. That's something I'd like to do a little bit more research on. It's not something that is as accessible And it's hard to know if there was a worker out there that might have been really good at art, but there's no way we would have known because they were a worker stuck in a factory their whole life. But that's it for this video, and thank you for watching.